Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Stephen Peinecker, and this is actually a very special Mormon Media Reviews when I talk to other podcasters and other YouTubers about their ventures that they're on. Of course, this could be a book review show because, of course, David Boice has written the book 52 Churches in 52 Weeks and has the YouTube channel 52 Churches in 52 Weeks. Welcome back to the program, David.
Appreciate it, Steve. Thank you.
So the reason I asked David to come on is that he just this past week, so let me give you... On February 7th, I flew out to Salt Lake City, Utah. Okay, I spent 10 days in Utah. I get back into town and I hear about Asbury. Apparently, Asbury Outpouring Revival, Great Awakening, whatever you want to call it, started on February 8th. So I get back into town and I live in a Christian community, so it's all the talk of the community. Now, why? The question, of course, is why, Steve, are you doing an episode on a revival breaking out in the evangelical world? Well, because Mormonism was birthed in the revival culture of the evangelical world. And this is the roots of your movement. It started in very similar, where they'd have these camp meetings that might go on for days, revivals that would happen. This is all very familiar to the world that Joseph Smith was born into and that he participated in. And this was the world that greatly influenced Mormonism. And so since we are having this event, this is happening right as we speak. David Boice was there this past weekend in, what town in Kentucky is this in?
Wilmore, Kentucky.
Wilmore,
It's
Kentucky.
A very small town. I had never heard of it before. I think it's a population of about maybe 4,000, 5,000 or so. What I heard is they have a Shell gas station, a Subway, and 2 stoplights.
Two. It's a 2 stoplight town. All right,
2.
Great.
Yeah.
So this is a tiny town in rural Kentucky, and you're having this revival breaking out, which is basically, from my understanding, they were having a chapel service on the 8th. Typically regularly scheduled chapel service, and it just didn't end. Like 250 hours later, we were talking on the phone this week. I said over 250 hours straight. So when things like this happen, you just sometimes have to take notice. Are we witnessing a cultural phenomenon? Are we seeing a religious awakening within Gen Z? David Boice, live from the scene, or almost. Let's just tell me a little bit about some of your experiences. How did you hear about it? What made you decide to go down there this weekend to do it?
Yeah, so I heard about it last Sunday. Social media started coming out about this college chapel, this prayer service that had gone 3 days straight. 108 hours straight is what I heard the first time. And when I first heard about that, I'm like, oh, I got to go visit this. But when I heard about it, it was on a Sunday night, Super Bowl Sunday. And over the course of the following week, then social media blew up. The newscast that went viral. And so by the time that this past weekend, which was a February 18th and the 19th, it was like the Field of Dreams, Steve. Like, it was like the ending of that movie where it's like, if you build it, they will come. And for this, it was like, if you pray it, if you praise it, they will come. And I made my video just recently, and you can see the traffic just coming in. Like, they had to close down the town Sunday just due to the town reaching capacity. It was just surreal to see this and to experience. And just in the back of your mind, you're just wondering, is this a Holy Spirit? Is this an outpouring for Gen Z as a whole? And with all my church visits I've done in the past, like I've never felt anything quite like this before.
And you don't really come from a charismatic Pentecostal background, so
No.
this is very new to you. What was it like for you to experience that service? And I want to talk about some other details. And just so you know, folks, David just recently released a video on his YouTube channel, 52 Churches in 52 Weeks, in which he does discuss it and show a video as well. So make sure after you're done watching this interview that you check out his video as well. But just what was the service like?
So first off, it was a 9-hour wait. I didn't think it was going to be that long, but like, you just kept waiting. And so outside was fascinating because it was it was almost like the feeding of the 5,000, the closest that I'll ever get to experiencing that, because you just had so many people out there. They had Salvation Army trucks, like disaster relief out there. So the first time that I saw that, I just kind of chuckled. It's like, come on, that's a little over excessive. But due to the amount of waiting and the amount of people that were there, like, you needed that. This was a town that only had a Subway, and I guess they had a smaller supermarket. So they had to have like a disaster relief setup plan for this. Like they were wheeling in porta potties. It was just too much. So like a lot of people, it was almost, people were just so generous. There was no money. There was no one trying to sell you anything. There was no tithing, nothing. It was generosity. So people are giving away, like I got some free nuts. People were giving away free Subway, free food, anything that they had. And at one point, like I didn't know if I was going to make it in there. And then suddenly all the Chick-fil-A delivery drivers came up and they start packing the Salvation Army with these chicken sandwiches. And you would just grab as many as you wanted and you'd go back to your line and just pass these out. It was, you know, 5 loaves and 2 fish kind of situation. So as soon as you got in, and again, like you can hear the worship going on as you're waiting in line. They also had a simulcast going. So like as soon as I got in, like I was so beat, Steve. I was just like sore, like my legs. I never felt old before, but I felt old standing in this line. But as soon as I got in, just completely revitalized. And like I come from a very fundamental background. Like I'm not charismatic. I'm not someone that's gonna, you know, raise my hands up and worship and kind of be like that. But when you got inside, it was like it was this freedom, this freedom of worship, just pure praise and pure prayer. And I try and be careful because I don't want this to sound like it's you know, too much or anything like that, because obviously you're still within yourself. This isn't like, you know, oh, I'm in heaven now or anything like that. But it was such an uplifting, and the way that I kind of term in my video is like this was a service that I felt like it was like a Psalm 23:5 where your cup overflows. And I just felt like the Holy Spirit was just pouring and pouring and pouring and pouring. And like it was for Gen Z. It was for, and I think one of the elders mentioned Gen Alpha. And I didn't even know the next generation's name, you know? So I'm learning that there. So to see the excitement for a newer generation, that that meant a lot. And after witnessing this, like we have a chance to stop trends. Like we've been on such a downward trajectory from Christianity, LDS, Catholic faith, no matter what type of faith you are. And to see what happened here, it was almost kind of like their way of, you know, we're putting our foot down. Like Satan has a hold on society right now. This is something that we hope that we can spread throughout all the nations. And to that fact, gosh, you know, there were people from New Zealand, there were people from Brazil, there were people from all over the country that had flown out to be a part of this. So, yeah, I'm still processing it.
Oh, that's very interesting just to hear it firsthand from you, especially somebody who does not come from a charismatic Pentecostal background. But you felt something. You felt like this was a move of the Spirit. It's very interesting because, you know, just to give some perspective here, folks, you know, Asbury University had an outbreak in the early 70s during the charismatic renewal movement. So it has a tradition of this, at least in its past. And it's interesting to see because, like, I look at it this way. Apparently, this movement is starting to spread to other college campuses, primarily other Christian college campuses within the southeastern United States. Now, this is what you got to look for. I'm giving people trend lines. What do you look for if something is going to be a sustainable, great awakening or some type of a revival that sweeps the land? Does this jump out of the southeastern United States? Does this jump out of the Christian college circuit and go into the secular universities and becomes a nationwide thing? If that happens, then we have the potential for another historic changing of history, which we saw the last time we really saw something was during the charismatic renewal movement in the 60s and 70s. It's fundamentally changed evangelical Christianity and America upside down. And this has the potential to do that. Or does it just stay in the Southeast and does it stay in Christian colleges, right? And then has it just become something that might be good for Christians, which is fine, but is this something that's how I like, that's when historians and anthropologists are talking about like the first Great Awakening, the second Great Awakening, talk about that, is like it's more than just people showing up for services. Does it transform society? And that's what many American Christians have been having a hunger for, is having another Great Awakening happen. We've had them throughout our history in this country, and it's just interesting to see the early days of something like this developing, and we'll see what happens. So that's just kind of giving my commentary on what we can expect. Now, that's the other thing. I grew up in the charismatic movement. I've seen what we thought would be revivals that kind of got weird, went veered off in directions that were not. They just, quite frankly, just became you could almost say heretics, in the sense that they became cultish or whatever. Any number of weird things would happen. So we also have to watch for that too. Could this devolve into something that maybe isn't of the Lord too? So these are just all the things that we have to take into account when we see these early manifestations of things. It was, where does it ultimately go? That tells us a lot to where did it start, right? What was the intentions of how it started? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk so long, but that just gives you some perspective on that.
No, that's great. And they've mentioned quite often one of their lead speakers, and that was a great thing too. It's like there was no human leader. There was no pastor, or like I didn't know anybody's name. It was just all very organic.
Were they singing music and then somebody might stand up and say a word or something? Is that what's happening? Okay.
Yeah. So at one point, it almost seemed like they kind of had some kind of rhythm going where they do some praise. There would also be some of the elders would have some messages, some type of sermons.
Okay.
There also were a lot of testimonies from these college students.
And were they just passing the microphone around and people would give testimonies that way?
Yep. So they typically would do about 10 at a time. And the way that they termed it, and I don't remember, the acronym was ABCDs. And I don't remember what A and C was, but B was be brief and D was don't preach.
Okay, good. I like that. Yeah, we need more of that in there. Yep.
Yep. So they would all give real quick testimonies, just about a minute. And one of the things that
just long enough for a TikTok video, right? That's a Generation Z. They just got to keep them short, right?
Pretty much. But I tell you, with what one of their leaders was saying is like, the big thing to me though was you had the praise, you had the testimonies, you had some little sermons in there. But the big thing that struck out to me was the way that the stage was set up. So they had like a almost like a Catholic altar, where you get down on your knees at the front, but there was almost like right in front of the stage where the elders was the discipleship. So it was almost like a moat. So when the college students would get up there and they get down on their knees, they would have these prayer partners, and they would, from what I understood with some of what the leaders were talking about, like these college students were just leaving it all on the altar. And the interesting component on how, to me, like how this took off so much was just the student body behind them, the excitement, the passion, the zeal. I mentioned in my video where it's like, with Christianity, Jesus Christ, 33 years old, with his apostles and disciples, like we think of the Lord's Supper, where they have these old beards and they're balding and they're these old guys. It's like you watch The Chosen, and it's like you see the apostles, and it's like they're not old, they're these young guys. And even with LDS, like if we want to bring that into the game, like Joseph Smith, like how young was he? Like it's a youth movement. So to see that kind of passion, and to see how our generations have been falling away from the word, falling away from the gospel, to see this just happen out of nowhere is just very intriguing.
Yeah, it is. It's very interesting to see this, because I think a lot of people within our world, within the charismatic world, have been kind of really hungering for something like this. I just have a few more questions. Was there people speaking in tongues during this service?
No.
No speaking in tongues. Okay.
No speaking in tongues at all.
Okay, and this is
it was all very composed.
Okay.
It wasn't like, I've been to some Pentecostal churches where it's like, they're running around and speaking in tongues. Like this was all very centered. Like at the same time, like I mentioned, it was this freedom. It was this pure praise, this pure worship. but there was no speaking in tongues or anything like
Interesting.
that.
Okay. And now, just so you know, folks, this is a traditionally Methodist college, which, of course, Joseph Smith and Emma were always partial to the Methodists. As a matter of fact, Joseph Smith was a Methodist exhorter during services where the preacher would come up and give the sermon, and the exhorter would come up to kind of get people to come up to the altar, if you will, or to really try to convict them of their, and make them maybe have a conversion experience. So this is all part of the Mormon world that Joseph Smith would have been very familiar with, these type of services. And that's why I think it's interesting, but it's also fascinating because this is happening right now. We're going to see where this goes. It's just kind of an exciting thing. Are you going to try to get back out there, like, or to see where this goes? Do you think you might do some follow-up on this thing if you think it's necessary?
I'm very curious to see other type of universities. On
Yeah.
Sunday, the next day, I visited Lee University.
Okay.
That was in Cleveland, Tennessee. So
You're
they
right
were.
by Christopher. You're right by Christopher Thomas, the Pentecostal Reads the Book of Mormon guy.
Oh, really?
You could have told me. You could have looked him up.
I hear so many good words about him
Yeah.
from your interviews. So with Lee University, they were kind of the second one to kind of take off revival
Okay.
style. When I got there, though, there was just a small group of college students,
Okay.
and they mentioned to me, it's like, I guess the administration, someone, we're just kind of like, let's put the brakes on this right now. It's Monday, like let's bring this back later. So,
gee, you know what? I'm gonna have to talk with Christopher. Christopher, what's going on, Church Guy, Cleveland, Tennessee, trying to tamper down a revival? Come on,
yeah.
what's going on?
but even with those few college students that I was with for just a few moments, it was kind of like, with the Holy Spirit, it's kind of this flame.
Yeah.
So with Asbury, it's this big beaming Pentecostal flame, charismatic flame going on.
Yeah.
But with Lee University, like faith is so dynamic, and even though it may have been a smaller flame, like it's still there.
So there. Okay.
It makes you wonder, okay, let's get this back up and going.
So this is very exciting. And David, I want to follow up, go back and talk about anything else you want to talk about, but I also want to talk about a movie that's coming out this week called The Jesus Revolution. Kelsey Grammer stars in it. He plays Chuck Smith, who was the founder of Calvary Chapel. But more importantly, we have the actor, and I don't remember his name. The actor who played Jesus in The Chosen is also playing a gentleman by the name of Lonnie Frisbee, okay, who was a gay hippie. Now, this is the thing. He was a gay man who helped start up the Vineyard as well as Calvary Chapel churches, which are two dynamic, large denominations within the charismatic tradition. Unfortunately, Lonnie's been whitewashed out of history because he was a gay man. But I'm hoping to see that they acknowledge his homosexuality in this, and that was part of who he was. But he was a very important person whose story needs to be told. Because he was gay, most people turn their backs on him, although it's a sad story, but I'm hoping that they do right by Lonnie and talk about the whole person that he was, and not just try to talk about part of him, because he is another example of a gay man who's had a major impact on Christianity. That movie opens up this weekend, and the reason why I bring this up is because the Jesus Revolution was also very much in a similar vein of these with young people, where you had these revivals breaking out. This was the Jesus movement, and it really brought in, it was just a huge thing. This happened in the late 60s, early 70s, right around the time you would have had another revival at Asbury in 1972. So it seems like we're seeing a repeat of history. What do you think?
It seems to be that way. And I feel like with Christianity, especially with media, like there really hasn't been anything for a long time. And like we've seen Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu and all these other type of streaming services, and there really hasn't been much from a Christianity standpoint. The only ones usually have been like documentaries about, Hillsong or Scientology, something in a negative light. So to see like shows like The Chosen, and we'll see what happens with the Jesus Revolution movie, there almost seems to be a hunger from that. So to see this, and like with The Chosen, like it's a fantastic show.
Which, by the way, folks, those of you who are watching this, who are just watching this because of the revival, you need to understand Mormonism is a very important role in The Chosen, because for the second season of The Chosen, they use the church's Jerusalem sets. Almost all the extras you see and many of these episodes of The Chosen are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I go to Utah and I say I'm an evangelical, and they say, we love The Chosen, we love it. And I even met extras who were performed in the show while I was out there. So we are seeing a convergence of our worlds also with The Chosen too.
Yeah. And with the show, to me, and they're very clear. It's like they are not trying to recreate the Bible. They're kind of doing their own little thing, but it's like you see some faces, you see some excitement, and just the passion and the drama of the show. So to see that, it's like, is that planting a seed into a younger generation?
We'll have to see. It's fascinating stuff, dude. I'm glad that you got to go.
Yeah.
Was there any other, I know we've gone a little longer than we planned. Was there anything else you wanted to add to this conversation before I let you go today?
Well, I'm just with this visit. This was one that I've never experienced before.
Okay.
We don't know what's going to happen with it just yet, but this was the first time that I really kind of saw Gen Z. I think with Gen Z, we often kind of associate it with like TikTok. And one of the things I've been so impressed with like LDS and Latter-day Saints is that younger component with the missionaries.
Right.
And like with the Protestants, it's like you almost like graduate from high school and then you just kind of like a dove, you just go and you go be free. And then like a lot of you go into college and it's just like there's nothing there for you from a Christianity aspect.
And many kids walk away from Christianity when they go to college.
Yeah. So then it's almost like you have to make the mistakes, and then it's like, oh, mom and dad were right, and then you go back to the faith. LDS doesn't do that, but with this, it's kind of like it has to be a youth movement. It has to be organic, and the fact that this had nothing to do with any kind of
planning
Elevation Church or Hillsong or Bethel Church, the big ones that kind of gear themselves towards the younger generation. To see this was just like head scratching, but interesting at the same point.
Wow, interesting stuff, dude. And of course, you're on week 42, and you got 52 churches, 52 weeks. Are we going to have a week 53, 54, 55? What's going to go on? What happens after 52nd week, sir?
It's funny you say that, because it's like, well, gosh, if this chapel service went into overtime, it's like, man, do I need to go into overtime myself?
Yeah.
So
do maybe follow-ups on some of the stuff you did too. Well, David, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the program. Of course, you and I have developed a friendship. It's been really cool because I've been sending, hey, go to this place, go to that place, and get connections. It's really fun that I've had an impact on your channel. Of course, you've had an impact on mine as well. I just want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing this story with our audience. And just it's just great to be able to have this like raise it happening, and you can share it with the people. I want to thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me. And hopefully with this could kind of spread it a little bit more with what's going on with a younger generation.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Where is this going to go? Is this going to transform American society, or will this just be something that sputters out? You just never know. Is it of the Spirit, or is this just a bunch of people who really, really want it to be, right? We don't know, but we got to wait until we see the fruits. Once we see the fruits manifest, then we'll know if this is of the Holy Spirit or not. And that's what we look for. It's real simple. It's not that complicated, actually. That the Lord's hand can be active at any time in our society, and we need to be open for any type of move from the Holy Spirit. And that's the key thing. I just remind you a few things. First of all, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell for when you'll be notified when the new episode will come out. We'll have links in the description for those of you who'd like to financially support the channel on both Patreon as well as PayPal, as well as our merch store, MormonBookReviews.com. There will be links in the description there. Also, our podcast is getting almost all caught up. Anthony's working on that, so we're very excited. We're on all the major podcast platforms. But remember, the most important thing, folks, this is the most important thing. Remember, all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.